So my name is Matthew Richards. I look after one of our professional services practices at Kocho. I'm joined by one of the team, Andrew Bennett, who's one of our security and AI specialists. And we're really fortunate to have John Moran from Microsoft, who's a security specialist. John is going to start talking to us a little, giving us an overview really of M365 Copilot and some of the value that presents. So John, I'll hand over to you.
Great. You can hear me okay?
Yeah, perfect.
Lovely. Good morning, everyone. So my name is John Moore, and I'm a specialist here in Microsoft. And so it's one of the fortunate people who uses Copilot day to day at the moment. So it's going to spend a little time talking around kind of why we use Copilot, what's the benefits of Copilot, and then try and give you a bit of a show and tell of some of the tools. So one of the first facts to talk around is from our work trend index. If you haven't read it, have a look at it. It's some really interesting insights that come from thousands of surveys we do. But we're seeing 64% of employees don't have enough time or energy to actually do their job. And the primary cause of this is the time and energy drain by doing things like searching for information, trying to find information, joining inefficient meetings, which I think you'd agree is probably a really big one. And that's just leaving about 40% of time to actually be creative for deep thinking and collaboration. So with Copilot, the goal is really to give you some more of that time back, your employees some more time back to do things that they're good at doing, be more creative and being more productive. So when we think about M365 Copilot, and today I'm just going to talk around 365 Copilot. You know, you're probably aware it's now infused in all of our products. So we've Copilot in Azure, we've Copilot in Power Platform, in Dynamics, in Teams Phone, in Power BI. So it's in everywhere. Today I'm specifically talking around 365 Copilot. So 3 areas that we see benefit from. Be more creative is the first one. So with Copilot, you don't have to have that blank screen anymore, staring at the first page of a PowerPoint presentation, trying to figure out where you start. So in seconds, you can have a fully created PowerPoint presentation, or you can have a Word document, or if you want to do up the first draft of a marketing campaign, you can have that done in seconds. So for someone like me, who admittedly is not the most creative person, having that ability to instantly create the first draft of something is really powerful and gives me a lot of time back in my hands. The second part is going to be more productive. So this is where we see a lot of customers getting real benefit from. So by using some of the tools like Outlook and Teams, being able to do things like summarize actions for you, recap chat history, provide answers to you, summarize long emails, recap meetings in real time, generate the AI notes for you, what are the next steps, all of that instantly done for you. It gives you immediate time back. And I'll show you in a second some of the feedback we've had from our early access customers, people who've been using the tool for a few months, not just Microsoft people, across different industries and across different roles, and their experience by using the tools. And we can see, you know, multiple hours saved each week by using these tools. And again, that's up to customers of how they want to spend that saved time. Maybe it's time that they can spend more time with their family, or doing things that it's important to them, or taking on new projects. And again, some of the feedback we've seen in that, and I'll share the link to the report of the feedback as well, is we're seeing things like the people who've used the tool are saying now, I think 30% or so would say that it would be a factor in their decision of a new employer, whether they have these tools or not. So real value in people being more productive and empowering them to give more time back in their day. And the final piece then is around up level. So if you're someone who mightn't necessarily be using Excel day to day, you're not a finance person, understanding really easily by using the English language how to utilize the full context of tools like Excel or PowerPoint if you don't have a good understanding of formulas and macros, just having English language prompts to be able to do it for you is really powerful. So this slide is just showing you some of the feedback we've had from those customers in the early access program. 75% says it saves them time by finding their files easier, saves time on mundane tasks, allows them spend less time processing email, which is a big one, makes them more productive. So all that, adds up to hours saved per day or per week. And then around kind of quality and being more creative. So the quality of people's work, again, we're seeing the improvement on that. Jumpstarting that creative process. So giving someone the first draft kind of is much quicker. And then the quality of the output is stronger as well. Another area which I haven't got in here, but from talking to customers myself who are using the tool, we're seeing other benefits outside of this. Things about accessibility, for example. So I had a conversation with a customer recently who's using the tool, and they've someone on their team with ADHD, and that means that they can't concentrate for long periods. So it means that by using Copilot, they can step away from a meeting and they can come back, and they can use Copilot to tell them what they missed in those 10 minutes that they left. Or if they miss something, again, they can ask Copilot to recap what did they miss in the last 2 minutes. All of that kind of gives more power to employees. Or things like, again, we had one of my colleagues with autism says he finds it hard sometimes to read the mood in the room. So again, Copilot can use things like sentiment analysis to understand, hey, this isn't a really positive call, or the mood in this is quite negative. So being able to alter their dialogue depending on what they hear. So with Copilot, there's two ways we can look at this. The first one is how does a customer what's the minimum requirements to be able to actually turn it on and use it? And we'll go to them in a second. And the second one is actually how to be optimized to use it. So not just technically being able to use it, but being confident that once you turn it on, you're not going to be able to have oversharing or data leakage in the business. So for example, I have Copilot now. If I go into my Copilot and ask, hey, show me a copy of my manager's latest payslip, that we're confident that actually that's not going to pull it up, because we have those, we've done that groundwork where we understand that we have those policies in place. So it means I don't have access, so I can't find it. So this is being Copilot ready. A couple of bits here. Again, I'll share these slides afterwards, but you need the minimum license of ME3. You need to be using Entra ID. But the most important one here is actually that you're using the tools in the graph. So SharePoint, Teams, OneDrive, the more data you have in that graph, the more richer experience you're going to be able to get. And the last point here is just around that kind of optimized experience. So we talked around the security side. So SharePoint site restrictions, information protection labeling, access reviews, DLP, retention policies. These are all things you should be thinking about before you actually decide to purchase or to roll this out. And again, Copilot doesn't change any of these. It just will use the policies that you already have put in place. It won't change anything. So that's enough for my slides for now. I want to just show you quickly some of the tools in Flow. So I want to show you this. So we talked about being more productive. So this is Outlook. So in this case, I have a chain of emails here. So let's say this could be 20 emails in a thread, and I'm gonna, instead of having to go through and read each single one to check if any of them is important, I can quickly summarize this thread with Copilot and ask it to summarize it for me. So you can see here, it's scanning that thread and it's giving me the summary. So it said, hey, Kevin's provided an update on the progress. There's a disagreement between Kevin and Lydia. Kevin's asking for my input. And here I can see where all the sources are, the citations. By clicking these, it'll bring me into it. I can also use Copilot in Outlook to help me draft responses to emails. So again, I can use Copilot. I can click draft a response, And now we've, I think it's coming shortly, we can use Copilot to understand our own voice, our own tone, how we speak, and train it to understand what a typical reply in our own voice might look like or might sound like. I want to show you this is the citations I mentioned as well. I want to show you Teams next. So if we go into Teams, and this is probably the one I use most myself. So Teams collaboration has changed now. So let's say this, for example, is a meeting that we've dialed in 15 minutes late. I was late. My other call was overrunning. You can see the Copilot button here. I can go into Copilot, and instead of me, which is what I would usually do, maybe pinging this person going, hey, what did I miss? Was my name brought up? I can ask Copilot to recap the meeting for me so far. What did I miss? And here I can see this is what was discussed. I can ask it things like what questions were unresolved. But here I'm going to ask, hey, how does the group feel about the inventory status? And that's going to go through the references, going to go through the transcript, and it's going to give me an answer here going, okay, the group has mixed feelings. On one hand this, on the other hand that. I can ask it things like what questions are unresolved. Really powerful stuff. And I had another customer that was using this for their interviews. So they were interviewing candidates by using this, and by having Copilot, they can go, okay, ask Copilot, what questions haven't I asked the candidate, or what was my question that like? So really powerful stuff. And just bear in mind, this is your own personal Copilot. Nobody else in the meeting can see this. This is only your view. So loads of things you can ask Copilot. So that's kind of been more productive. I can also show you stuff like Excel. So in all the Microsoft apps, you'll see this little Copilot button here. I can ask Copilot loads of things. So in this case, let's say I have these decimal points here. I can say, remove the decimals, and nothing more stressful than typing live. But here I'm asking it to remove the demos, or to remove the decimals. So hopefully this should remove these decimals here. Hopefully the demo gods are with me today. There. So you can see just by using English language, that's changed that. But that was a really simple one I've used there. I can add it. I can say show items with net sales of this. I can say highlight these five. I can ask it for formula recommendations. I can ask it things like analyze the data. So Copilot isn't just able to make recommendations or make changes. It can actually analyze the data for me. So I can ask it to go here and give me any inputs, any recommendations, any insights that they have into the data itself. So this could be a really long, complex chart here. And here it's going to give me some insights. Here's it's giving me a nice bar chart, give me some insights and summaries. That's one. I can say, give me all the ones you have. So in this case, I'm going to add it to give me all of the insights you have and add it into another grid. This is what it would look like. So in this case, it's analyzed all the data and it's given me loads of different insights I can use. The last one I'm going to show you is PowerPoint. Again, I mentioned that kind of blank screen problems that people like me would have. Again, I can use Copilot to go in and go, let's say I want to create a presentation on generative AI in the legal sector. I'm just thinking on here at the top of my head. And again, being able to, so someone like me who, if I want to go in and make changes to my presentation, add transitions, change the font, all that stuff just takes time. So again, it's just putting the power back in your hands, giving you time. You can see here it's giving me a nice presentation. I can ask it to make it more professional. I can ask it to make it add more slides in, make it less wordy, just using prompts here. You can see here, all of it will include notes. So it's giving me speaker notes for all the slides as well. You can ask it to make nice transitions, change the fonts, anything like that. I can say insert a slide about the top tech trends in legal. So that should show me then there's another slide. And again, you can think of a million different use cases here, but the idea is just to give you that starting point, help you be more creative, and just to give you time back. So that's a really quick overview. Again, I could have spent hours going through how it works and all the tools and all the functionality, but that's a really quick overview.
Some interesting stuff there from John with M365 Copilot. Hopefully you can see the value, and I think John hit the nail on the head, right? That's just scratching the surface really of what it can do. Some huge potential there. So what I'd like to do now is to spend a little bit of time talking to you about how Kocho can help you, embrace or benefit from some of these technologies. First of all, we'll talk about Microsoft Copilot, or specifically here 365 Copilot. We're able to provide more insight into the technology, help you better understand it. We can help you prepare, for adopting it. John went through a number of technical recommendations, whether they're the bare minimum or whether they're the optimized and recommended things to do. So I've got a slide just to talk about that in a second. We're also able to help with developing enhancements as well to M365 Copilot. So Copilot, out the box, will be able to index and understand and ultimately reason about data that exists within your SharePoint and OneDrive and sort of data repositories that are graph connected in essence. But we can take that a step further and help develop the appropriate plugins or connectors to connect up any particular data source. And again, we'll talk a little bit more about that as we move on. The second one here is around the custom solutions. So this is basically working off the platform of Azure OpenAI. And this indeed is the platform that Copilot is built on, right? So we're using exactly the same platform, the same technology, but what that affords us is the ability to be very specific, I guess, with the solution that we're developing. So we're able to, deal with highly sensitive information that in a responsible and a controlled manner. We're able to layer in lots of different sort of layers of processing, and again, we'll touch on one or two of those areas as we move forward. We're looking across, all verticals really, because I think, the technology lends itself to all walks of life, right? Not just commercial vertical organizations, but to everybody. So it's a huge it'll have a huge impact. I think I'd love to see how things look if we fast forward maybe 1 or 2 years and see the benefits of some of this technology. So that's the custom solution, and we'll dig in a little bit more into that in a second. And then from a continuous improvement or continuous innovation perspective, we're keeping on top of the technology. We're staying close not just to Microsoft but also to OpenAI and also the broader industry. We're working with many clients to understand some of their challenges and how Copilot can work. So we're continually involving our propositions then, if you like, and ways that we can help our clients benefit from this technology. So if we focus in now a little bit more closely to how we can help you with Microsoft 365 Copilot. So it starts on the left really with, you want to understand a little bit more about the technology. What is it? How we can benefit you? John's dug into a little bit of that, but we're able to sort of spend a little bit more time and go through some different scenarios that may be valuable or interesting to you. And then the next step typically could be the need to build a business case, right, internally for the investment into this technology. So, we've got a team in Kocho. We've got a very capable team of business analysts that would work with you to better understand how your organization works, and ultimately to define a series or a set of personas that are very specific to your organization. We'll then further refine those personas into what they typically do on a day-to-day basis and start mapping out their activities. That's useful or important because we can then translate that into a cost, right? So we can give you, okay, well, this persona is spending, X amount of time on these activities and the typical cost is X. And then we can then layer on the benefit of Copilot onto those scenarios and start giving you some, much closer insight into the actual value that you might expect by embracing the technology. So what does Copilot do in terms of its impact to this persona's day-to-day work? Well, something that may be a creative activity, creating a document, creating a PowerPoint, similar to what John was showing earlier. That turns from maybe a couple of hours activity down to a 5-minute activity, right? So we can start sort of extracting some of these use cases, giving you some context into the value that Copilot would present. And then we move on to the technical readiness side of things, again, touching on some of the things that John mentioned. And I just wanted to call upon or maybe talk in a little bit more detail about one specific area that John did mention. And that is about making sure that you've got your, access model within SharePoint in a good place. So it's very common that we see, people inheriting organically permissions to different document libraries, and eventually, you end up with this sort of ungoverned platform where people might have access to things that maybe they shouldn't have access to. So what we can do here is help you understand what that or help you address that challenge ultimately. And again, it's building upon the personas that we will have identified in the business case exercise, and then we work with the relevant business unit owners, managers, stakeholders, whoever is appropriate, to start understanding, well, what data should this persona have access to? So we'll build out that map, that understanding of what it should be, and then we'll work with you to remediate your existing SharePoint site, in essence, or sites, to make sure that people only have access to what they should have access to. But it's not really the end of the story there. What we then need to make sure is that you have the appropriate governance capability when we get you to that right place, that good place, if you like, of access to data. So using a lot of the Entra technologies to help wrap around some governance controls, so that you can make sure that things are managed on an ongoing basis. And then finally, on the right hand side, we've got adoption. So we've got this great technology. We've made sure everything's right, that people have access to only what they should have access to, got all the technical requirements checked, and now it's we're about to release this to the users or the groups of users within your organization. So this is where our adoption services come in, and this is where we have a team of change architects, change consultants that live and breathe adoption and change management in essence. But it's a really important aspect because, with the investment in Copilot, you need to make sure that your end users can get the value out of that and maximize that. So, we've developed an adoption approach to make sure that happens. I also touched on earlier our ability to develop plugin and connectors. So M365 Copilot has the concept of plugins or connectors in terms of its extensibility. So think of that as reaching out into other information sources so that Copilot can reason about the data that you've exposed to it. So we can develop, if we've got something that isn't in the catalog, because Microsoft will have a catalog of plugins and connectors available. Typically we come across those data repositories that may be bespoke, specific, maybe a custom application, whatever it might be. We can help develop the necessary connector and plugin to interact with 365 Copilot. So a comprehensive sort of end-to-end activity there to help you maximize help you justify the investment, I guess, initially, and then ultimately to get the biggest and the most benefit out of the technology. We then focus our attention on, I guess, custom solutions built on the OpenAI platform, the Azure OpenAI platform. So this follows this a reasonably similar process in terms of helping you build a business case, but this might be against some very specific use cases that you have. We talked about maybe dealing with highly sensitive data. There may be a whole raft of other use cases that you want to develop solutions for that benefit from the AI technology, so we can help you build a business case to justify the investment. And then typically we just go through the normal sort of discovery and solution development exercise. So in discovery, we'll dig into the detail around, what are the use cases, who are the users, what are the specifics, etc., really get that detailed information. So that then allows us to develop the appropriate components within the Azure OpenAI platform to allow us to ingest data, to index it appropriately using the semantic index, to ultimately optimize various activities. We can put lots of different layers into that solution to give you the appropriate assurance in terms of how the data is handled, what information is coming back to the user. It really is sort of within our control or your control when we look at a custom solution. So if there are any specific activities that need to happen, actions that you need to trigger, or whatever it is, we're able to inject that into the overall sort of solution workflow. And again, adoption is an important aspect. So whatever we develop, it's going to be exposed to a series or group of users, and therefore we need to make sure that they're comfortable and familiar with using it. So, to sort of elaborate a little bit more here, this is around, very much looking at the prompts that users will use, and the prompt is ultimately the question that you're asking of the solution, ultimately the large learning model or chat GPT, whatever you want to call it. So we can start looking at, refining that prompt, grounding it with the appropriate information, layering on different things into that then when we get the response from the LLM, we get a far more accurate response. We can then actually take that response and provide further processing against that, so that we're able to potentially provide outputs which are in a consistent and well understood format, maybe certain language or certain things that are required in terms of this solution. We're able to have full control over the end-to-end solution. So Andrew will actually go into a little bit more detail on that in a second, to show you some of the things that we've been working on. But just the final thing I'll say here is that, this whole concept of generative AI is something that at Kocho we've been looking at intensely for the last 12 months. We've really done quite a bit of analysis. Obviously, this technology provides an incredible potential to help Kocho, right? We're a managed service, security managed service provider. We do the same typical day-to-day things as everybody on this call, no doubt. So there's a huge benefit for us. So we're also looking at that, and we'll learn a lot from that and be able to take some of the learnings and value directly to our clients for them to also benefit. So without further ado, I'm going to now hand over to Andrew Bennett, who's going to talk to us about some of the work that we've been doing over the last sort of 6 to 12 months. Andrew, over to you.
Great, thank you, Matt. So let me just get everything ready here. So the first point is, why would you want to use a custom solution over Copilot? Well, as previously mentioned, potentially, as an organization, you don't have the relevant controls in place. So as John mentioned, you need to make sure that you've got the SharePoint site access restrictions in place. That way you can prevent a user asking a potentially embarrassing question, such as, how much does my manager make, as an example. On top of that, you might be using some homegrown applications and databases that you've developed over a number of years or potentially decades, and they don't have native integration into sort of the Office platform. Or you might interact with it using a custom application. In those circumstances, you've got a few different options. As Max mentioned, you can sort of create a Copilot plugin or connector that then sort of provides or sort of integrates that native functionality within the Office platform, like in Word or in Excel, as John sort of demonstrated. However, there might be some scenarios in that, like for example, in that custom application where you may want to introduce generative AI functionality. In those cases, Copilot wouldn't be able to do that, so we need to look at sort of a custom solution instead. On top of that, you may sort of expose, you may want to expose generative AI functionality to more than just your organization. You might want to sort of expand it out to the general public. So as an example, you might have a public knowledge base out there, and rather than having users have to search through and read through tons and tons of documentation, you might want to create a help bot. So to do that, we can create our own sort of AI solution, and then we can integrate that directly with your website. That way, you don't have to sort of obviously invite the user into their tenant. You don't have to sort of license them for Copilot or anything like that. It can be sort of a more cost-effective solution. On top of that is the assurance piece. So as Matt mentioned, one of the things you want to be sort of very careful about is that the data you're getting back from a generative AI solution is accurate. It is relevant as well. And something that you may have experienced if you use ChatGPT over the last year or so is responses can change over time. So because you're not in control of that AI model, what can happen is you can ask a query one day, and then the next day you get a completely different response, or it sort of fails to respond in the exact same way. Something that's happened over the last few weeks is if you use ChatGPT, if you're sort of very polite and formal with it, you ask ChatGPT, can you please do X, Y, and Z? Suddenly ChatGPT is going around saying, no, I can't do that, even though it was sort of a few months ago. So by having control of the model yourself, you can you can provide the assurance that the response is going to be stable and not going to change over time. On top of that, you may have seen in the news, people have been getting into trouble with generative AI. So this is an example from a few months back where 2 US lawyers were sort of fined because they were essentially using ChatGPT to do their research for them, and ChatGPT just completely hallucinated fake cases. And on top of that, more recent news, ChatGPT is now spitting out sensitive data or some of its training data if you ask it to repeat a certain word, continuously. So this is like additional reason you may want to sort of investigate a custom solution. Because you have end-to-end control, we can essentially customize the prompt engineering, so we can make sure that users can't exploit, your own model in similar ways that people have been doing with sort of ChatGPT and sort of other public generative AI models. Now, onto this demo. So the demo itself, it was created using Azure OpenAI Studio using GPT-4, the OpenAI model, and is presented via a custom web app interface. The solution itself is aimed at sort of understanding and being able to reason through UK law, both past, present, as well as sort of HMRC guidance, and sort of we've given it some basic understanding of contract law. To do this, we sort of built a custom parser to be able to go through every iteration of UK legislation there's been, as well as all the current sort of HMRC guidance. What we do to that is we can then sort of during the ingestion process, we can sort of do some enrichment. So we can essentially provide additional context and metadata. So for example, a law might be written one way, but enforced in a different way. Now using sort of a public generative AI model, potentially all it's going to do is do a find and search for the bit of data you're interested in UK legislation. It might not be able to understand the context. But because we have control over the AI model, we're able to feed that context, and we can prioritize certain data sources over others. So we could say, for example, case law is more important than legislation, as an example. So, purpose of this demo is to try and demonstrate how we can sort of resolve those sort of other pain points that I sort of just talked about there. So in this model, we're sort of presenting our model through a custom web app interface. However, this could quite easily have been a Teams chatbot, SMS or WhatsApp interaction. Essentially, the presentation layer can be customized to meet any particular use case or scenario that we may have. So in the first example, I'm going to ask you an edge case question. So I'm going to ask you, what is the current duty levied against pipe tobacco? So this is a bit of an edge case question, because if we take a look at the UK legislation, Nowhere in it does it mention what pipe tobacco is. Instead, it just has an other smoking tobacco category. Now, using other generative AI models, what may happen in this scenario, because it can't find this information directly in the UK legislation, it might just try to infer that automatically, or in the worst case scenario, completely fabricate an answer. So to avoid that, we can sort of train and manipulate our models to essentially give us a chain of thought, or provide a sort of reasoning. And in this case, we've done it through referencing. So as sort of John demonstrated in Copilot, our model has come back with a reference, has told us exactly what piece of UK legislation is pulled from. Now, you might be asking where, how has it figured out that sort of pipe tobacco is sort of in the other category, and it's not just hallucinated it? Well, that's come from the HMRC guidance that we've also provided it. One of the controls, or one of the capabilities we have by using a custom solution is we can completely limit the data set to just purely the data we provided. We can say, I don't want you sort of pulling data from your training set or going out to the open internet to find information because the internet is unreliable, or we have this refined data set and we only want to look at that. So this is what we've done in this circumstance. So if we asked it a question it didn't know, so if we asked it something else, it's just going to sort of say, sorry, I'm not able to answer that because I don't have the relevant information. So that way we can have a fail-safe system, which, rather than sort of fabricate information, it's just going to say no. So that way we can provide some level of assurance. So the next question I'm going to ask is, what were the rates previously? So now in this example, it's having to go through every iteration of the UK, or every modification to the UK sort of Finance Act, or the new ones as they come out, and sort of provide us a summary table of every time it's changed. So this demonstrates two things. Firstly, it demonstrates the fact that it's only showing us the relevant information. So if something else changes in the Finance Act, but doesn't affect the overall sort of duty, then it's not going to demonstrate that because that's not useful to us. And on top of that, it's presenting it in a sort of formatted table. So rather than sometimes what you've seen sort of ChatGPT, where it just spits out sort of bullet points or one massive paragraph, it's provided us in a useful table. And we can control that through sort of our fine tuning. So we can sort of basically train it to say, if you're spitting back lots of data, then throw it in a table rather than giving us in text. So on top of that, we can sort of give an example of how it can sort of rationalize multiple different bits of legislation. So the way UK legislation works is, rather than sort of republishing the laws each time they make an iteration, instead the latest legislations will essentially say, take some text from an existing document and replace it with X, Y, and Z. So this, for a basic AI solution, can be troublesome because it doesn't necessarily know how to layer that new data on top of old data. But as you can see here, it's perfectly understood what's happened. So in this case, it's telling us that the main change to airfare duty in the 2003 Finance Act was that standard class travel, the rate was halved, air duty. So now if I take a look at the slides themselves, so we can see here on the left-hand side is the 2003 Finance Act, and then on the right we can see the original Act. And we can see that it's understood that actually in the latest Finance Act, it's taken some text and overwriting previous text that was there. It's able to understand sort of the context and understand how UK legislation works. So lastly, I'm just going to give an example where we're going to give a tenancy agreement. So we previously ingested a tenancy agreement between sort of a landlord and a tenant. In here, whoever was drafting it made a couple of mistakes, and we're just going to ask our models to review it and highlight any potential issues. So if I submit this, it's going to have a think about it, and then it should return back 2 points. There we are. So in the contract that we provided, it's highlighted two different issues. So there's one which is in the contract itself, it's stating the tenant must be is the one responsible for ensuring that the house itself is fit for habitation. However, in recent sort of Welsh legislation, then actually it's the landlord's responsibility. So that demonstrates sort of a few things. One is being able to sort of provide additional context again over what is being provided. So if I go into the actual sort of contract itself, we can see the mistake here highlighted there. So that should be the landlord, not the tenant. So firstly, it's understood the document we've provided it. It's understood that it's a tenancy agreement, and it's understood what regulations apply to this document. On top of that, from the previous slide, the property itself is in Wales. So it's understood that actually we should be looking at Welsh legislation, not English or Scottish in this case. And on top of that, there's two conflicting clauses. So in this case, we've got two clauses. One of them says the tenants themselves can change, the supplier of electricity and gas, and then in the following, in a subsequent clause, we've said that actually the tenant's not able to change the supplier of electricity and gas. And it's sort of gone. It's understood that in the context of this document, and sort of is able to sort of reason that logic to say, actually these two are conflicting. Therefore, there's an issue with this. So those are some basic examples, and we sort of just to demonstrate the capabilities of generative AI. But hopefully that's been sort of being able to highlight the capabilities of this technology, and hopefully giving you some ideas of where this may apply into your own organizations. So I'm going to pass back to Matt. Let me just
fantastic
change over.
Thank you, Andrew. So hopefully some interesting insights into, I guess, the art of the possible, right, with this technology. I think, at Kocho, we really understand, we've got a really solid understanding of the technology, and, what we need are those use cases really with which to apply our understanding of the technology. We're obviously building that, but if you've got some specific use cases that you think might be relevant here, that you'd like to better understand how the technology might benefit you, then rest assured we have that relevant sort of technical knowledge within all of the various components that comprise the I guess Azure OpenAI Studio and the platform as a whole. So we've got a little bit of time for some questions now. I can see that John has been very busy answering all the ones actually that have been asked some questions around Copilot working in teams where you've got external people joining, and will that work? And John has responded to that question and various. I'm not going to go through them. You should be able to see all of those questions and answers there. But a minute or two just to see if there are any other questions. Please fire them into the question window. We can't unfortunately get you to sort of talk. It's part of the Teams live meeting, which prevents that. But if you have a question, please post that and we will happily respond. So while you're doing that, I think, just to elaborate a little bit more on some of the other things that we're doing, Andrew alluded to a number of things regarding sort of UK legislation and HMRC recommendations and information, etc., etc. We see these as really valuable sources of information, and we want to make sure that they're appropriate and can be used in an AI solution, responsibly, accurately, and with all the appropriate assurance that needs to come with it. So some of the things that we're thinking of doing, and we're in the process of developing, to be honest, is building a catalogue of things that I mentioned before, things like plugins and connectors that you're able to subscribe to, and maybe facilitate that subscription through the Azure Marketplace. So it'll be almost a help yourself type sort of scenario there, with programmatically that will sort of enable the functionality within your organization. So some interesting things there. Obviously, we're not just going to be focusing on legislation or financial type information. We're going to have a much broader reach, which I'm looking forward to working with the team to develop. So watch this space on that one. I can't see any of the questions coming through, so I think we've sort of naturally come to an end of the webinar. I guess the last thing for me to say is just a huge thank you for everyone to join, everyone taking time out of their day to join us today. If you do want to take that next step and want to better understand how this might apply to you, then please get in touch. We'd happily host a Vision 30 call with you, basically a discussion around, you know, what are your thoughts, where's your interest, and we can help you better understand what might be the next step, appropriate step for you to take. But a huge thank you for your time this morning. Hopefully you find it useful, and look forward to working with you moving forward. Thank you very much.